words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the one whom we adore as the Mother is the divine conscious force that dominates all existence, one and yet so many-sided that to follow her movement is impossible even for the quickest mind and for the freest and most vast intelligence. The Mother is the consciousness and force of the Supreme, and far above all that she creates. With our love and blessings, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Words of our Lord and our Divine Mother, taken from the compilations of the works written by Dr. Karan Singh. Topic: Contact with the Psychic Being. Question: Sweet Mother, you said that it is not easy to come in contact with a psychic being. Why do you consider it difficult? How should I begin? For this, our Divine Mother says, I said not easy because the contact is not spontaneous, it is voluntary. The psychic being always has an influence on the thoughts and actions, but one is rarely conscious of it. To become conscious of the psychic being, one must want to do so. Make one's mind as silent as possible and enter deep into the heart of one's being, beyond sensations and thoughts. One must form the habit of silent concentration and descent into the depths of one's being. The discovery of the psychic being is a definite and very concrete fact, as all who have had the experience know. Question, Sweet Mother, once the being has entered into contact with the psychic, why does the psychic again hide itself? For this, our Divine Mother says, it is not the psychic that hides itself, it is the being which returns to its ordinary consciousness. It is difficult for it to remain at its highest. One slides down and falls back. Only the second time the discovery is easier. And each time the road is easier until one no longer falls back, says our Divine Mother. Question, Sweet Mother, once the psychic has come to the front, can it withdraw again? For this, our Divine Mother says yes. Generally, one has a series of experiences of identification, very intense at first, which later gradually diminish, and then one day you would find that they have disappeared. Still, you must not be disturbed, for it is quite a common phenomenon. But next time, the second time, the contact is more easily obtained, and then comes a moment which is not very far off when, as soon as one concentrates, aspires, one gets a contact. One may not have the power of keeping it all the time, but can get it at will. Then, from that moment, things become very easy. When one feels a difficulty or there is a problem to be solved, when one wants to make progress, or there is just a depression to conquer or an obstacle to be overcome, or else simply for the joy of identification, for it is an experience that gives a very concrete joy at the moment of identification, one truly feels a very great joy, then at that moment, whatever, one may pause, concentrate for a while, and aspire. And quite naturally, the contact is established, and all problems which were to be solved are solved. Simply to concentrate, to sit down and concentrate, to aspire in this way, and the contact is made, so to say, instantaneously. Our Divine Mother says, there comes a time, as I've said, when this does not leave you, that is, it is in the depths of the consciousness and supports all that you do, and you never lose the contact. Then many things disappear. For instance, depression is one of these things. Discontentment, revolt, fatigue, depression, all these difficulties. And if one makes it a habit to step back, as we say, in one's consciousness, and see on the screen of one's psychic consciousness, see all the circumstances, all the events, ideas, knowledge, everything. At that moment, one sees that and has an altogether a sure guide for everything that one may do. But this, perforce, takes a very long time to come, says our Divine Mother. Question, sweet mother, what is the meaning of the psychic being in the physical consciousness? For this, our Divine Mother says, one can find the psychic through each part of the consciousness. You can find a psychic behind the physical. You can enter into contact with the psychic directly through the physical consciousness, directly through the vital consciousness, and directly through the mental consciousness. It is not as though you had to cross all the states of the being in order to find the psychic. You can enter the psychic without leaving your physical consciousness through interiorization, because it is not an ascent or a gradation, it is an interiorization, and this interiorization can be done without passing through the other states of the being directly. This is what Sri Aurobindo means. You are in the physical consciousness. Nothing prevents you from opening this physical consciousness to the psychic consciousness. You don't need to develop vitally or mentally or to return to these states of being in order to enter into contact with the psychic. You can enter directly. The psychic manifests itself directly in your physical without passing through the other states, and that is what it means. For this, the child says, sweet mother, I think that one gets the psychic consciousness only when the psychic comes to the surface, or when you can go deep inside to enter into contact with one's psychic being. For this, our Divine Mother says, very often when one touches certain parts of the mind which are under the influence, the psychic influence, and full of light, and the joy of that light, or when one touches certain very pure, very high parts of the emotive being, which has the most generous, unselfish emotions, one also has the impression of being in contact with one's soul. But this is not the true soul. It is not the soul in its very essence. These are parts of the being under its influence and manifesting something of it. So, very often people enter into contact with these parts, and this gives them illuminations, great joy, revelations, and they feel they have found their soul. But It is only the part of the being under its influence, one part or another. Exactly what happens is that one touches these things, has experience, and then it gets weaned. And one wonders, how is it that I touch my soul and now I have fallen back into this state of ignorance and inconscience? But that's because one had not touched one's soul. One had touched those parts of the being which are under the influence of the soul and manifest something of it, but are not it. Our Divine Mother says, I've already said many times that when one enters consciously into contact with one's soul and the union is established, it is over. It can no longer be undone. It can no longer be undone. It is something permanent, constant, which resists everything and which at any moment, whatever, if referred to, can be found, whereas the other things one can have very fine experiences and then it gets weaned again. And one tells oneself, how does that happen? I saw my soul and now I don't find it anymore. It was not the soul one had seen. And these things are very beautiful and give you very impressive experience, but this is not the contact with the psychic being itself. The contact with the psychic being is definitive. The contact with the psychic being is definitive, and it is about this that I say when people ask, do I have a contact with my psychic being? Your question itself proves that you don't have it. That you don't have it, says our Divine Mother. One child opens the question and answers of 1929 of our Divine Mother and says a quote, Sweet Mother, you have written here, we are conscious of only an insignificant portion of our being. What are these insignificant parts of our being? For this, our Divine Mother says almost all of them. There are very few things which are not insignificant. All your outer ordinary reactions, thoughts, sensations, actions, movements, all this is very insignificant. It is only at times when there is a flash of the higher consciousness through the psychic and opening into something else, a contact with the psychic being which may last for a second. At that moment, it is not insignificant. Otherwise, all the rest is repeated in millions and millions of copies. Your way of seeing, acting, reacting, thoughts, feelings, all that is ordinary. And you believe you are extraordinary, particularly when you are seized by extraordinary sensations and feelings, those that you consider extraordinary. You believe you are lifted higher, nearing something superhuman, but you're quite mistaken. It is nothing but an ordinary state, deplorably ordinary. You must enter deeper. Deeper, try to see within yourself if you want to find something which is not insignificant. Then the sadhak reads out the quote from Sri Aurobindo's Lights on Yoga and says, Sweet Mother, here our Lord has written, the nexus between the psychic being and the higher consciousness is the principal means of the Siddhi. Ordinarily, is there not a nexus between the psychic being and the higher consciousness? For this, our Divine Mother says, ordinarily means ordinary life. a relation between the psychic being, it is almost unconscious. In ordinary life, there's not even one person in a million who has a conscious contact. Our Divine Mother says, in ordinary life, there is not even one person in a million who has a conscious contact with his psychic being, even momentarily. The psychic being may work from within, but so invisibly and unconsciously for the outer being that it is as though it did not exist. And in most cases, the immense majority, almost the totality of the cases, it is as though it were asleep, not at all active, in a kind of torpor. It is only with the sadhana and a very persistent effort that one succeeds in having a conscious contact with his psychic being. Naturally, it is possible that there are exceptional cases, but this is truly exceptional and they are so few that they could be counted. When the psychic being is an entirely formed, liberated being, master of itself, which has chosen to return to earth in a human body in order to do its work, in that case, even if the person doesn't do the sadhana consciously, it is possible that the psychic being is powerful enough to establish more or less contact conscious relation. But these cases are, to say, unique and exceptions which confirm the rule. In almost all the cases, a very sustained effort is needed to become aware of one's psychic being. Usually, it is considered that if one can do it in 30 years, one is very lucky. 30 years of sustained effort, I say, it may happen that it's quicker. But this is so rare that immediately one says, this is not an ordinary human being. That's the case of people who have been considered more or less divine beings, who are great yogis and great initiates. Naturally, it is difficult to establish a contact between the most external physical consciousness and the psychic consciousness. And oh, the physical consciousness has plenty of goodwill. It is very regular. It tries a great deal, but it is slow and heavy. It takes long. It is difficult to move it. It doesn't get tired, but makes no effort. It goes its way quietly. It can take centuries to put the external consciousness in contact with the psychic being. But for some reason or other, the vital takes a hand in it. A passion seizes it. It wants this contact for some reason, which is not actually a spiritual reason, but it wants this contact. It wants it with all its energy, all its strength, passion, fervor, and in 3 months the thing is done. So then, take great care of it, the vital. Treat it with great consideration, but never submit to it, for it will drag you into all kinds of troublesome, untoward experiments. And if you succeed in convincing it some way or other, then you will advance with giant strides on the path. There are two principal things. The first is the capacity for enthusiasm, which makes one come out of his greater or lesser inertia in order to throw himself more or less totally into the thing which rouses him, as for an instance with an artist or with a scientist. A possibility to create an enthusiasm in him, which is then active and something in him awakens, and then there is a participation of the whole being. And there is this, and there are other those who have an innate faculty of gratitude, who have an ardent need to respond with warmth, devotion, joy to something which they feel like marvel hidden behind the whole of life, behind the tiniest little element the least little event of life, who feels this sovereign beauty or the infinite grace which is behind all things. Well, for them, the contact with the psychic was very frequent, almost constant, and to the extent that they were capable of it, conscious, not very conscious, but a little, in the sense that they felt that they were carried, held, lifted above themselves. These two things prepare people the most. They are born with one or other. If they take the trouble, it develops gradually, it increases. The capacity for enthusiasm, something throws you out of your miserable, mean little ego, and the generous gratitude, the generosity of the gratitude, which also flings itself in thanksgiving out of the little ego. These two most powerful levers to enter into the contact with the divine is one's psychic being. These are the two most powerful levers to enter into contact with the divine in one's psychic being. This serves as a link with the psychic, the surest link, says our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother continues to say, usually those who have become conscious of the psychic being expect that it will liberate them from vital physical attractions and activities. They seek to escape from the world in order to live in a joy of contemplation of the divine and in the immutable peace of constant contact with Him. The attitude of those who want to practice Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga is quite different. When they have found their psychic being and united with it, they ask it to turn its gaze towards the physical being in order to act on it with the knowledge that comes from the contact with the divine, to transform the body so that it may be able to receive and manifest the divine consciousness and harmony. And to all those who join the University Center, I say once more, never forget our program and the deeper reason of coming here. And if, in spite of all your efforts, the horizon sometimes darkens, if hope and joy fade away, if enthusiasm flags, remember that it is a sign that you have drawn away from your psychic being and lost contact with its ideal. In this way, you will avoid making the mistake of throwing the blame on the people and things around you and thus quietly, needlessly increasing your suffering and your difficulties. In human consciousness, everything is slow when we compare time that is necessary to realize something with the average length of human existence. It seems interminable, but happily there comes a time when one escapes from this notion, when one begins to feel no longer according to the human measures. As soon as one is truly in touch with the psychic, one loses this kind of narrowness of agony which is so bad. I must be quick, I must be this, I must be that, I must hurry. One does things very badly or doesn't do them at all. But as soon as there is a contact with the psychic, this disappears. One begins to be little more vast, calm and peaceful and live in eternity, says our Divine Mother.